monthly meeting. And I work in construction project management of affordable housing. And I thank you all for attending.
And actually, I skipped over Ethan. Ethan has joined us from Costa Rica.
Hi, thanks, Liz. Happy to be joining from Costa Rica and to be representing the Energy Co-op of Pennsylvania. I'm actually a board member on the Energy Co-op, and we provide renewable energy in various forms, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
And Marion Story-Biddle.
Hi there. So I am, well, I'll give my connection to Quakerism, since you guys are mentioning, it's all my kids went to Germantown Friends School. But I've been working with a group called Solarize Southeast Pennsylvania, and I'm also kind of an EV advocate, so that's what I'll be talking about today. But
so I'm going to flesh out a few of these introductions while people are still joining us. Paul has a very deep background in affordable housing, and he's a trainer in energy efficiency and is quite the technical guru when it comes to energy efficiency and all things of that sort. Ethan Burchard is in finance and knows a lot about clean energy finance. And Marion Story-Biddle is an IT wizard. She was the IT director for the streets department in Philadelphia before she retired. So I'm very thrilled to have a local group. All of these presenters are local, and they are really truly experts. And I'm just really delighted to be able to bring local expertise together. I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but before I do that, I just want to say that many of you are familiar with some of this content, and we're going to, in the next hour and a half, we're going to give an overview, a really broad overview of how each and every one of us can think about reducing our end uses in our own homes and cleaning up the fossil fuel end uses in our own homes, how to decarbonize in our homes. And I thought the timing of this, Ruth suggested this timing, which I thought was perfect because, you know, it's right before holiday season, and I'm putting some things on my Christmas list as a result of this. So it's an interesting timing. So I'll just share my screen. And again, thank you very much for joining us. The way that we're going to walk through this is we're going to take the better part of an hour and maybe a few minutes to go through the presentation. Please enter your questions in we have a Q&A, don't we? Or just a chat? Okay, enter your questions in the chat. And we will get to as many of these questions at the end of the presentation as we possibly can. Every question that we do not get to during this presentation, I promise you we will answer. So if you have not pre-registered, if you got the link without pre-registering, please put your name and email in the chat so that we can send you additional information after the webinar. Ruth and I are putting together a very good resource page or pages, and we want to send that to everyone after this webinar. And then we also want to send you written responses to any questions that we don't get to during the webinar. So please make sure that we've got your email. And with that, okay. So we've already introduced ourselves and gone through the intro, so we'll get right into it. So as everyone can see the screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as you all know, we are trying to cut our global greenhouse gas emissions in half in the next 9 years. And then we're trying to get to a condition called net zero by 2050. This is a really tall order, and it will require each and every one of us. So this little pie chart on the right here shows you where these emissions are. The wedge right here is that says commercial and residential is actually buildings. And that's where we're going to start tonight. So that's 13% of US carbon emissions. Transportation, this giant darker wedge here, is 29%. And we're also covering that. So these two wedges is where we're focusing tonight. And the balance of this depends on our ability to decarbonize, depends on this wedge, which is 1/4 of our pie. Electricity is 25%. So electricity in the United States is still fairly dirty. And we do need to focus electricity because once we clean up the electricity sector, it'll be much easier to clean up the balance of our economy. So eliminating carbon emissions begins at home. Tonight, we're focusing on decarbonizing all end uses. And those include heating, water heating, cooking, laundry, lawn care, and transportation. And I snatched this wonderful diagram from EPA, and I adore this. It just is a beautiful combination of everything in one simple diagram. So the clean energy supply is here represented by solar photovoltaics on site in a green box. And then we have the orange, which is energy efficiency, which is absolutely critical. And then the end uses in burgundy here, the high efficiency electric and use appliances.
Pat,
Liz,
Pat, excuse me for the interruption, but there's a question. Can you put the slides in presentation mode? Are we in the slideshow mode right now?
No.
Can you do that?
Let's see. I'm always
Yeah,
hitting plots.
Keep going to the right over there where it says slideshow.
Sorry, I can't see that.
There's transitions, animations, and then slideshow.
Yeah, sorry, it's blocked.
Oh, I don't think I can do it because it's not my screen.
So you'll just have to bear with me.
I think it's hard for some people to see.
All right, well, they're gonna have to bear with me. Sorry. All right, so we're gonna start here. So step number 1 in this process is asking, is your electricity source a clean electricity source? And if it is not, can you, every one of us can do more to clean it. And there are many ways to do that. I have a highly proficient technical assistant here helping me. I'm going to give it a second here. Set up slideshow, that one.
If you just click on from current slide.
Current slide. Ah,
Perfect. Beautiful.
hey, thank you. That was Paul. He's in his basement. Thank you. So we can all do more to clean our electricity supply. And eventually our utilities will be providing clean electricity, but they're not doing that yet. And in all 3 states that we're trying to address tonight, which is Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, all 3 of these states are moving toward a cleaner energy supply, but none of us are there yet. So this slide captures all the ways that we can all clean our own electricity supply. And we're going to start here. The first bullet is you can install solar on your own home. And I'll just mention Philly. In Philadelphia, we have a fabulous program called Solarize Philly. And this is the website to link to that. Solarize Philly is essentially a bulk purchase program. And Marion has also been replicating this program in Southeast Pennsylvania. So there's a Solarize Southeast Pennsylvania program. But these are programs where people join together and produce a discount and a really high quality service as a response. And Ruth, did you want to talk about New Jersey?
Sure. New Jersey. Oh, for the clean, you mean for installing solar?
Yes.
No, I don't think there's really anything in particular to say about that.
Okay. Well, New Jersey has had a really excellent set of clean energy programs available for some time. So we've included this website here. New Jersey Clean Energy is a very broad suite of clean energy programs covering both solar, on-site solar. You can find out about community solar and energy efficiency at this website. So New Jersey Clean Energy just is a statewide website for all clean energy programs.
Liz,
Uh-huh.
when we get to community solar and purchasing renewable energy, I can say a few words.
Okay, great. Delaware has, for all of you, is anyone from Delaware? Anyone tonight? No? Okay. Well, Delaware has a really excellent statewide set of programs also, and they are administered by the Sustainable Energy Utility, or SEU. So they've got a really kind of one-stop shop there in Delaware. The other thing to know about solar on your own home is the federal tax credit is still in place at 26%. It started off at 30%, which is where Paul and I took advantage of it, but it's now bumped down 1 notch to 26. And in the Build Back Better bill, it will go back up to 30 and remain there for 10 years. But it depends on, the way that goes with the Build Back Better bill. The 26% federal tax credit is huge and is a really wonderful incentive. The way that it's structured is you can take advantage of it across tax years. You don't have to use it only in 1 year. You can spread it across more than 1 year, which is a big advantage. The second option, if for whatever reason you don't want to install solar and you don't want to own the solar system on your own home, you can lease it. And I've included only one lease option here, which is Posigen. Posigen is a wonderful company, actually based in New Orleans, Louisiana. And the nice thing about Posigen is they, in addition to leasing a solar system, they guarantee savings. And principally the way they guarantee savings is they combine solar with energy efficiency. So they conduct an energy audit of your home and they roll out a proposal to do energy efficiency, and they will only move to completion with solar if they can guarantee you savings.
Mm.
And that's, I think, pretty unique in the leasing space. Another option is community solar. And what community solar attempts to do is overcome all of the barriers that individual homes may have. So if you've got too many big trees, you rent your home, you have a roof in poor condition, you're thinking about moving next year, any of those conditions would prevent you from installing solar on your roof. In 3 states nearby, actually 4, we're not including New York here, but in all the surrounding states, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, New York, community solar is available. And Ruth, can you say a few words about this in New Jersey?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. New Jersey has had a community solar pilot project for 3 years now. And in New Jersey, anybody, I assume this is true in every state, anyone who is a utility customer is eligible to become a subscriber for community solar. In New Jersey, 40% of the capacity is reserved for low and moderate income customers, which is encouraging. I think that this website is pretty good. In general, as Liz said, the New Jersey Clean Energy website covers so much that it can be at first a little bit daunting to navigate. But if you go straight to community solar, it has some good question and frequently asked questions. And one of them is that one of the facts that I learned by reading those frequently asked questions is that in New Jersey, a subscriber can either be a monthly subscriber or they can buy right into the community solar project, whichever one they choose, upfront. There are a number of community solar providers in New Jersey. I didn't count how many there were, but I saw lots and lots of applications. And the way it works here is that each year there's a deadline for the people who want to be providers of community solar to get their application in. Since the deadline for year 2 is February of this year, I suppose that the deadline for year 3 will be February 2022. But that doesn't mean that you as a subscriber can't go in after that and actually subscribe to community solar.
So the way that community solar works is it's usually a very large system with many different subscribers, and you can subscribe for a portion of your load or 100% of it. And it varies state to state. And we have about 28 states currently doing community solar, and it does vary state to state. The last option, so let me just reiterate, you can install solar on your own home, you can lease solar, you can participate in community solar if you don't live in PA, and you can purchase renewable energy from a supplier. And you can do this everywhere. So we've got a website here for New Jersey, but we're going to focus on one example and ask Ethan Burchard to take us into some detail in the energy cooperative.
Liz, so again, I'm on the board of directors of the Energy Cooperative, and as Liz mentioned, also my career is in finance and specifically sustainable, environmentally and socially responsible finance. So all areas near and dear to my heart. The Energy Co-op, we have been doing renewable electricity. Liz knows something about this, having a past association with the Energy Co-op, but we're first to market with renewable electricity in the Philadelphia area quite some time ago now, and are still providing 100% wind and solar power to customers in southeastern Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia. You know, this is a marketing slide that I got from the co-op. The no tricks, no gimmicks. You know, I think what's interesting about that is that a lot of us, and until I joined the board of the Energy Co-op, I was someone who purchased 100% renewable electricity for some time. but I was buying it from an outfit that was basically a subsidiary of a traditional utility, traditional energy company. So I think you can shop around for renewable electricity and find a lot of options, and some of them are quite price competitive, but often that's because they are essentially they're just a wing. They're subsidizing more traditional energy put out by large suppliers. So for instance, one name, Green Mountain Energy, is a name that's been out there a lot, and they're owned by NRG, which is a big traditional energy company. So I think it's an exciting thing about us at the Energy Co-op that's different is you really can trust it. We're member owned, been around for a very long time, even given an option to get all your renewable electricity from Pennsylvania. And we have plans at 99, as you can see, 99% wind, 1% solar. And I think, I believe in absolutely in rooftop solar, and in those kinds of microgrid almost kind of solutions. But especially in cities, that's not always possible. Some people, they may not be constrained, because it's very expensive to do solar, or it can be, although there are lots of great tax credits, as Liz mentioned, but maybe also just from being in an apartment building or in some situation where it's a bit more difficult. And so I think what's nice about having this option is it can either be a solution for people in that situation, or it can be a transitional solution. I want to do solar, but I need something for right now, and I don't want fossil fuel energy in my house. That's a niche that we can readily fill. And I'll also just mention, it's not on this slide, but that we also in the past, just about a year now, the Energy Co-op has been first to market in Philadelphia with renewable natural gas. So again, as you could think of it as a transitional solution until you electrify all your appliances and your home heating and these things that Liz was just talking about. As long as you have gas, we also have a solution for that. Renewable natural gas is reclaimed from landfills and other waste sources. And it's a way to leave behind, fossil fuel energy in different forms. So again, another offering from the Energy Co-op. So I don't have a lot of time, and there's a lot of great stuff in this presentation. So I will pass the mic back.
Thank you.
To answer questions later.
Thank you, Ethan.
Liz, can I say with just a quick word about the New Jersey third-party
Sure.
provider program? It's called New Jersey Power Switch. And if you go to the website, which is newjersey.gov/New Jersey NJ Power Switch /suppliers, you can find a list of over 80 third-party providers that are available to New Jersey customers. As long as you're a customer of a utility, you can apply to get your power from a third party. And the easiest way to do it is to look at their list of suppliers. They list them by your utility. So either your electric utility or your gas utility. Obviously, in this case, we're going to be looking at our electric utility. And then you can find their phone number, their email, what plans they offer. Most of them do not offer renewable energy. This is not just an option for those of us who want renewable energy. It's also for people who are trying to find a way to cut their energy costs. But there are a number of them that do provide 100% renewable energy. And once you identify somebody, the easiest thing to do is call them, and they can actually make the switch for you. They just need your account number and a point of delivery ID number from your bill, and then they will make the switch for you. And you will still get billed by your electric company, and your energy will still be delivered by your electric company. So you're going to be paying two charges, one for the energy itself and one for the delivery. And it's all, in my case, with public service, electric and gas, it's very easy to figure out exactly what it is that you're paying.
Great. Thanks, Ruth. There is a comparable website for Pennsylvania, and I'm sorry, I neglected to put it on here. So when we provide additional information after this webinar, I'll add that to the list of resources that we have to share with you. So step 2, improve energy efficiency, reduce your load. And I absolutely adore, I think this is my all-time favorite image in the universe. I love this donkey. So he perfectly, exemplifies this problem, which is if you have a very high energy load, that is you're using a tremendous amount of energy, and you're trying to use clean energy and you want to put a solar system on your building, it's going to be hard for the solar system to carry that load. So the thing to really know about energy is energy efficiency is the cleanest, safest, and most cost-effective form of energy. It also creates more jobs than any other energy source. So it's very critical. So if you reduce your load, you can put the donkey back on his feet and he will be very pleased. Fortunately, all 3 of the major states we're covering tonight do have, they have required energy efficiency programs. And I'll say just very honestly that New Jersey and Delaware are doing better than Pennsylvania in this regard, but Pennsylvania does have energy efficiency programs. You can find, if you're a customer of PECO, you can find them here at this website. And every utility in Pennsylvania, every electric utility is required to have energy efficiency programs. The reason they're not as good as New Jersey and Delaware is they're not as robust. They're not whole home programs. They're, I call it widgets. They will give you, certain measures, but they won't give you the whole home. In New Jersey, this website will guide you to the home performance with Energy Star programs, and the same in Delaware. Home performance with Energy Star is an EPA program, and it basically is the entire home. And we are awaiting federal tax credits in the BBB, which is Build Back Better bill. So hopefully that will pass before the new year. And it's apparently loaded with all kinds of new federal tax credits for energy efficiency and solar and electric vehicles. So keep your eye on that ball. So all electric homes, we're going to dive into this now. So is this, yes?
Sorry, before you switch, I just wanted to tell New Jersey listeners tonight that the program in New Jersey is a whole home program. They require a home assessment, and they require insulating and sealing and other energy efficiency measures before you can get a loan. I mean, those are included in the loan, but you can't qualify for the loan program unless you do the home assessment and the energy efficiency. And then they have 0% financing for 10 years.
That's amazing. That is truly amazing. 0%, that's amazing. Okay, so all electric homes, this is, as you can tell, not a new idea. And I remember looking at these snazzy ads when I was a kid. I honestly don't remember Ronald Reagan being one of their ad guys, but it's not surprising since he was a Californian. I think this really took off, this futuristic stuff took off in California. But this was a really big push and was, quite glamorous. This little lady here with her wonderful hat and spectacles is my personal favorite. It's so funny. And then this guy over here with his camera and the happy family having more fun now that they've moved into a modern total electric home. So this was really a big thing in the 60s and 70s up to the mid 70s. And it had a great impact, switching out a lot of coal heating and oil. And you can see this dark red area of the United States is the area where electric heating really predominates. So we've got the entire South and parts of Southwest and then the Northwest, but not so much in the Northeast. Pennsylvania is still very heavily fossil fuel heating and use, and most of Pennsylvania is gas, although we have quite a bit of oil, fuel oil, remaining, particularly among low-income people in the Southeast. So oil is still a really big, and propane in rural areas. So we've got a lot of gas, a lot of oil, and a lot of propane remaining in PA. And I'm going to turn this over now to Paul, who's going to take us through heating and water heating.
Okay, so we've all heard about this new magic called the heat pump, and it does have a fair amount of magic involved, but you already have that magic in your house if you have a refrigerator. It still works on the same principles. The big news is that there's been a lot of improvements in the technology. And we're not going to spend a lot of time. This is an overview, but so we're going to go through some of the different types of heat pumps. We're going to go through the fundamentals of how the technology works. We're going to talk about efficiencies and some of the parameters that you might see, how they're labeled. And then we'll talk about some of the issues you'd consider if you were considering installing heat pumps. Okay, so I have a list here of some of the improvements, and these improvements have happened kind of on an ongoing basis for the last 20 years, but definitely in the last 10 years. And the good news is that we can have heat pumps that will heat our homes in this climate. I finished a project last year on Cape Cod, which is in Massachusetts, which of course has more heating degree days than this climate. And we installed heat pumps in all our affordable units. They do not have backup electric resistance heat. They only use the heat pump technology, and they work into the negative digits. And we have had no complaints from our residents. That was using the Fujitsu line of products. So I'm not going to go through this list. You can look at it. If you have any questions later, we can talk about it, but I don't think we're going to get too down into the technical details. But I just listed some of the things that have helped improve the technology. But you'll notice the word variable, and that's important to point out. So in other words, it used to be kind of on and off technology. So if your system is designed to cool you when it's 95, it doesn't necessarily have to work as hard if it's 82, but it still would work just as hard if it's just an on and off system. So the technology now can ramp down when it doesn't have to go at that extreme. And the same with heating. And that's why we have more efficiency, because we take advantage of what's called the shoulder months, which would be like your spring and fall, when you still haven't fully climbed out of your heating in spring, or you still haven't fully ramped out of your cooling in the early fall months. So the big thing, as I mentioned, equipment options that run to -10, you're going to see that number, some say -15. And that doesn't mean the thing just dies and shuts off. It means it doesn't work as efficiently, and you might not get as much heat out of it. But you're not going to all of a sudden freeze if it goes to -12, if it says it's going to give you 95% performance at -10 or -15. But the good news is, like I said, it works in very cold climates. They're using them in New England, they're using them in Minnesota. Okay, a brief note about the heat sources I have listed. Traditional air source heat pumps is predominantly what we're going to talk about and what the focus is, and that's going to be your most cost-effective investment, especially with the newer technologies, which can now get heat out of cold air, which sounds a little strange. It doesn't feel warm to us, but heat is not the touch, it's an energy source. So as long as there's a difference between the outside air and the refrigerant, the technology, you will get an exchange of energy. And that's how the system works. Think about your freezer, which is awfully cold, but maybe it's not cold enough. Somehow the technology in the refrigerator is going to take even more heat out of it to get it to the temperature that you want to have the freezer at. So the next item on the list of, I got air sources, ground source, and you've probably heard about that. And that might be something to consider, I would say, more if you're building a new house, because you have all kinds of access to digging equipment and the land is open and you can kind of strategize about where you might want to put a web, like a spider's web of piping that fans out, or dig a couple of deep wells. But obviously, we're talking about more equipment. We're talking about excavation. We're talking about money. It might be twice the cost. So you're going to probably be more like $25,000, over 20. It's considerably more expensive. Of course, it's going to be more efficient, but that doesn't mean the air source is not efficient. So I'm just going to focus on the air source predominantly, but you've heard about ground source. And then the last note is more for clarification. You've also heard people say geothermal. Well, geothermal is something that Liz and I were fortunate to actually see in Costa Rica, where Ethan is. They have real geothermal, which uses the thermal energy of the earth to create steam, to drive turbines and generate electricity. But the systems we have around here really aren't geothermal. They use the heat that's in the ground. So some people call them geothermal, but they're still relying on electricity that's generated up here to turn fans and create the flow of refrigerants. So basically, it's a different name that some people use for ground source heat pumps. Okay. So the magic technology that we talked about, a heat pump, like its name says, it pumps heat, it moves the heat, it doesn't create heat. So that's where the efficiency opportunity is. So we're not burning more fuel as far as getting the heat. We're basically taking energy that's in one area. So on a cold day, we're taking energy out of the outside and we're bringing it inside. And the way that works is it works through a refrigerant cycle and changes of state. So changes of state are like when your sweat evaporates, when you get a cool breeze and your sweat evaporates, you go, oh, that breeze feels so good. Well, that's because when that water from your perspiration changes to vapor, it takes a lot of BTUs of heat with it. It's like when you boil water, to get that water to finally boil. We talk about the problem of watching a boiled pot, it doesn't boil, because to get from 212 water to 212 steam, there's a lot of energy that has to go into the water for it to vaporize. So the technology of heat pumps uses the magic of evaporation to take up heat, and then condensation, which is when it gives up, vapor gives up heat and it turns back to water, like dew, or like when you take a cold soda can out of the fridge and it gets wet all around it. That water has come out of the air and the can of soda has taken all the heat out of it and it's turned to water. So you'll see that some of the names of the equipment, they have there's a condenser. Well, this compressor and this fan, this coil here would be let's see. So this would be the evaporator. It's taking heat. So it's evaporation, it's pulling heat. And then the condenser means it's giving up heat, it's turning back to a liquid. And there's a reversing valve, which makes the heat pump more than just a one-way system. So you have an air conditioner, perhaps, that's a one-way system. The refrigerator is a one-way system. The heat pump has a reversing valve, and it allows the system to work the other way around. So you can now take heat out of your house in the summer and put it to the outside. I focused on this picture because I think it was more important for us to think about heating, because that is where we really think about, wow, how can we get heat out of cold air? It has to do with the delta or the difference in temperature. It doesn't have to do with what you feel. I mean, your comfort is very important, but the idea of the technology is as long as you can create a temperature difference, you can take advantage of that. Okay, I think I said enough about that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a couple types of systems. So if you have an existing system in your home that uses ductwork, that may be a hot air furnace, we call it, that's driven by gas, you would have ductwork in your house you could take advantage of. So you could then get an air handler. Well, you actually have an air handler, but you may want to end up with a new air handler that uses that ductwork. So here on the right is a picture of an air handler, and you see some of the white tubing, which is the line sets, the piping that comes from the outside unit, and it goes into the coils. And that's where in the winter, you're going to get heat out of the coils. And then in the summer, it's going to take heat out of your house and send it back outside. And the little piping that you see that drops down lower in the bottom is your condensate lines. And the condensate is the humidity, which is another advantage with the heat pump, is that it's going to take humidity out of the air in the summer. And that has a lot to do with your comfort. Okay, so similar to traditional AC, central AC, in that it's using a central system and it uses the ductwork to distribute that throughout the house. It pushes the air through the ductwork through the same vents you probably already have. I mean, we do use this sometimes in new construction. It's called a split system, but we are starting to get more and more away from these and use mini splits, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then on the left is just an example of the condensing unit, which was outside. So these are actually pictures. Well, the one on the left is a good friend of mine who converted and put a split system in his existing ductwork on the first floor of his house. Okay, so now the mini splits are these are ductless for the most part. So you end up with, once again, you have an outdoor unit. It looks a little different. It's a little bit slimmer. These are the more efficient, newer units. They typically have this kind of look. This is one of the Fujitsus I referred to that was up on my job on Cape Cod. And then on the inside, excuse me, you have these wall units, which are typically up near the ceiling, so several inches below the ceiling, and they're in individual rooms. So you have a lot of control over each room. In a sense, could be a zone. So that's another way you can be very efficient, is that you're not going to be in all the rooms at once. So you can actually keep a room cooler. I'm talking about in the winter, of course, and in the summer, you might want to do the opposite, have it a little warmer, and then just to have your cooling focused on where you are predominantly using the building. So this is kind of just a picture of kind of the standard equipment. There's all kinds of variations on this theme. They do have, sometimes once in a while, we'll have a duct that connects a couple of the heads that might push air into another adjacent room through a closet, but typically they're just individual heads. So a mini split technically is just one head, but often there'll be 2 or 3 heads coming off of one condensing unit. Could even be more if it's big enough. And I think technically it's called a multi-split, but I don't think most people don't use that term. The idea is you have these individual line sets that come from the condensing unit outside, and then they go right to that wall hung unit. Now, of course, you do have to drill a hole in your wall. You got to get to that. It has to have the line sets, which are the refrigerant lines that both bring refrigerant to the unit and take the refrigerant back to the condensing unit outside. it needs to have electricity, and it needs to have condensate drainage, like that water I talked to you about. We're going to take water out of the humidity, the humid air in our house. Where's it going? Well, we sure don't want it running down the wall, do we? We want it outside. We want to get it somewhere where it's not going to cause any problems. So you just see that nice clean unit on the wall, but there's lines coming to it and leaving from it that we have to get in there and we have to hide. And now if you look at the picture on the right, the condensing unit outside, you'll see that kind of piping that comes off the back and then goes right up the wall vertically. That has a cover on it. So the line sets and all the lines I just described are in that cover. So that's an issue. We'll talk about it a little bit more later, but when you're considering this technology, there are some aesthetic issues. You're going to have to run the line set. Where is it going to go? Typically in a rehabilitation, like an existing home, it's going to be on the outside of the wall. New construction, we punch it right through the wall and it's inside. Okay. This is a different type of heat pump that we don't talk about a whole lot, but I just wanted to mention it to you because you might have a situation where this is a standalone unit. The entire thing is what you're looking at. There's a sleeve, so you have to cut a reasonably big hole through the wall. It's lined up with the window, and that has there's a structural reason for that, because the window frame distributes the weight of the wall off to the sides of the window. You can take advantage of putting the hole there without causing structural problems in the wall. And the unit itself is self-contained. So it has the condenser, the compressor, the evaporator. It's got the little technology, and you're going to end up with there's a control panel you flip up. You've probably seen them in hotel rooms you stayed in. A lot of the rental housing that's being built, I know I see a lot of them punch through the walls on the units that are being built up here in Roxborough, where we're being overwhelmed with new multifamily construction. They're called P-TACs, and they're a cheap way to get it all done. They're not quite as efficient. I'd say you might have a little more noise. I just want to let you know it could be an option. You might have like a bonus room over a garage. You might have a situation where you only need to deal with one room and you can just get it done. So I don't want to say too much about it. It isn't that common in the housing that I'm building, but it could solve a problem for you and get you a heat pump that runs on electricity and is fairly efficient. Okay. Okay, so energy efficiency metrics, you're going to see SEER a lot. That one's pretty common. The numbers that I have up here are basically the Energy Star ratings. So that to me would be the minimum that you would want. I of course would highly recommend going higher than that. Like I will say for SEER, I would go for 20 or higher. If you look on the right, I give you an example. This was from one of our systems on the Cape I mentioned, and the SEER is 23. The SEER has to do with the seasonal energy efficiency throughout the cooling season, meaning you're cooling your house down. So it has to do with the cooling capacity. And it includes all those shoulder months I talked about where it can be more efficient, the high demand sections, and it's an overall rating of how much energy you can get out of the system for how much you have to put in. The EER under it is, you might see that for standalone air conditioners, and that rating isn't as, I don't think it's as useful because it has a very specific criteria where it's only for a certain temperature, which I believe is 95 degrees, and a certain humidity level, and they just test all the equipment at that one setting. So you might go, well, wow, that's only a 12. Well, that's it for a very, very demanding condition. It doesn't give you an idea, how does this operate over a whole spectrum, which is what you're going to want, because you're going to have to use it throughout seasons and months. The next next is the heating system performance factor. And the newer heat pumps are 8.2 and above. I would say I would recommend going more than 10 and no more than 11. They now have improved those quite a bit. Once again, so I just want, this is basically the lowest, the Energy Star floor. In other words, the numbers that I put up here. Does that one, let's see. Sometimes you don't get all of them listed for one unit. I guess I don't, that one I don't have. Oh yeah, that is the rating was 10 on the unit to the right that I was demonstrating for you.
Paul, we're
unit
gonna have
we-
to move on a little faster.
Sure. Coefficient of performance is another metric. It's kind of been taken over by the others. So, but you want to have 3.5 or above. 4 is becoming more common. Okay. This is just another example of the refrigerant flow. This is for air conditioning, the same system running the other way. So we can skip over that. Okay, so the considerations, you would want to consider which type you want. The costs are quite variable depending on the size of the system and how many units you want to put in. That's why, that's a huge spectrum, but I can't just give you an exact price, and it would vary a lot depending on your needs. If you're in an apartment, if you're in a 3-story building, if you're going to have separate zones, the heat load analysis is very important, and the right sizing related to that, because traditionally contractors put in units that were too big. It really wasn't much more of an expense, and you're always going to have enough heat. Liz and I had 140,000 BTU Wild McLean boiler we had for many years here. It's way oversized. We replaced the boiler and we went with an 80,000 BTU unit. I did a full manual J heat load analysis. I recommend a contractor that's going to do a load analysis more than just using parameters. And related to that, if you can make your house energy efficient, that's the first thing you should do. And that's the most cost-effective thing you should do. Okay, you're going to have to decide the units are inside or the units are outside. And we're going to mention water heaters. Now our heat pump water heaters. They're more costly, but of course they're much more efficient than your traditional electric water heater. There are some considerations. I have them listed on the left. They take up a little more space. Obviously, they cost a little more. It uses the heat from the surroundings, so it cools the area around it. So if it's in a basement area, it's in an area that doesn't have a lot of use, that isn't going to affect you personally, but you just ought to keep that in mind. And they do make a little bit of noise. And we don't even have anything presented here. There are heat pump dryers, which are much more efficient. They're about twice as costly as a traditional dryer, but once again, it'll be the way of the future if you're at that point of got to replace your dryer and you want to go electric. I want to consider that. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. That was awesome. I learned a lot. That was great. We could do a whole session on heating and water heating. So thanks so much. Now we're going to switch gears. So this is something I know very little about. And I think Marion Biddle has one of these. So Marion, chime in. So this is cooking. And this is not conventional electric cooking. This is induction cooktops. And it works by creating an electromagnetic field. So it is not combusting, it isn't combusting anything, and it isn't resistance heat, which is what the old conventional electric ranges were. It's magnetism. So it's totally different. It's very clean as a result. It's very safe, and it's far more efficient. And this is on my Christmas list, Paul, just in case you were wondering. But this is really apparently a fabulous way to go. The thing to remember about it is that it works on magnetism. So your cookware has to be able to connect with the magnetic field. So cast iron is good, enamelized cast iron and stainless steel. And so today I tested my own cookware, and cast iron happens to be my personal favorite, so that'll work. And my pressure cooker is my also personal favorite, and that'll work. But my copper bottomed pots will not work. So I'll have to replace those. Aluminum, glassware, these items will not work, as they won't carry a magnetic charge. So induction cookware, and in looking online at the pricing, it's really a very, very wide range. And because I've never experienced this, I can't really comment on it. Sorry about that. We're going to move on to washing and drying. And many of you probably already have front-loading washers and dryers, but if you don't, I highly recommend these. A front-loading washing machine is not only going to save you on energy, but it also saves a lot on water. It uses far less water, and your clothes come out a lot drier than they do with a top-loading dryer, top-loading washer. So it takes much less time to dry your clothes and much less energy to dry them. And because these appliances don't cook your clothing, you know, an old-fashioned dryer actually heated your clothes up and it cooked the water out of your clothing. That's not the way this works. So your clothes last longer and stay in good shape longer. They don't wear out. And these are just definitely far superior. So now we're going to move. Sorry for the pace of this, everybody. I know this is probably exhausting, but we're going to move on to lawn care. And I'm going to transition here in a minute to Marion. And many of you probably have already gone electric in your lawn care. But for those who have not, I cannot recommend this enough. Paul moved us into all electric lawn care equipment, and it is so much, much better than gasoline powered this and that. The mower has a really big battery, and you simply plug that in when you're finished, and it recharges, and you've got it ready for the next time. These are much quieter. They're really clean. There's no, you know, nasty gasoline fuel to load up and spill and store and all the rest of it. It's really, it's much, much better. And they're easier to start. I always had trouble starting an old gas mower. And this is just, you know, you push a button and you connect, you just, you know, pull your levers together and boom, you're off and rolling. And it stops immediately. It's very maneuverable, much lighter weight. It's really fun. I actually enjoy mowing. I never used to mow the lawn, but now I like mowing the lawn. So anyway, this is definitely the way to go. And I'm going to transition here to Marion, and you're going to take us into transportation.
Okay, so I had to throw in my electric items. So as you can see, we have in the front there, I also have an electric lawnmower, which I enjoy using as well. And I got the biggest one I could because I tend to mow the lawn after it's very, very long. And this lawnmower has done a great job. So we have the lawnmower, we have weed whacker and a chainsaw, and they all use the same battery, which is convenient because then you can, well, you end up with multiple batteries, and you actually the battery for the lawnmower lasts maybe uh, it can last like 45 minutes, an hour, and it only takes 20 minutes to charge. So you can just kind of mow forever if you want to. Anyway, we also have 2 electric cars. That one in the back is the Chevy Bolt, and we have a Tesla Model Y. But I really don't have much time at all, so I'm going to race through this. So real quick, what type of EVs are there? There's really 3 types. The hybrid electric is the one that most people have heard of since the early 2000s. The Toyota Prius made that really famous, but that was, you could never drive on just electric. Then they came up with the plug-in electric, which allows you to drive on it would have a battery, and it would be like 20 to 40 miles. And you could plug that in, and that for the first 20 miles, maybe you wouldn't be using your internal combustion engine at all. But after that, you would flip over to a gas engine. And the ones that are really popular now and are really the way of the future are completely 100% electric vehicles. And that's the Bolt that we have, and the Tesla are 2 examples of that. And they really the range can go all the way up to 400 miles. So next slide. All right, so what are the advantages? Well, first of all, there's no local emissions because there's no tailpipe. And if you buy renewable electricity or you have solar, then you are, in fact, you have no emissions at all for operations. Generally, you just charge at home. The cost of the fuel, which in this case is electricity, is actually significantly less than gas. And there's really barely any maintenance because there's no oil. The maintenance is rotate the tires until about 120,000 miles. And then you have to do some sort of changing of some fluids related to temperature control. The regenerative braking that all of these electric vehicles have is something that allows, as the vehicle slows, the kinetic energy is actually used to brake, and your brakes get way less use. And in fact, our Toyota Prius, which we had a 2004, and the first time it needed new brakes was over 100,000 miles. So it's a significant savings there. And the best thing of all is it's really fun to drive. It's fast, it's there's no sound, and it's a great car. So next slide. Oh yeah, no emission sticker, had to put that in. Anyway, but so sorry. So how do you charge? We only have a 110 outlet at our house, even though we have 2 cars. Now we don't drive a huge amount, which is partly why that's true, but that little picture up in the corner is our 110 outlet with the charging cord going out the window to the driveway where we charge our cars. So you really can be pretty low tech on this. But if you want to charge faster, you can get a 240 volt dryer type outlet. Any electrician could do that because it's similar to a dryer. So as you can see there, it says 4 to 6 miles per hour is on the 110. Clearly that's super slow charging rate. But if you can just plug it in all night and you drove maybe 20, 30 miles in the day, you've got a full battery again. But if you drive more, you would want a 240 volt outlet, and then it would get 25 miles per charge hour, at which point you pretty much can fill the car every night, even if you drove the whole way. So the bottom one there is the electric vehicle supply equipment, is also known as a charging station. And that's more just a fancy way to get 240 volt electricity to your car. And it would have more information. It would track the charging that you've done. And it could allow you to schedule the charging. So you would want that if you want to be a little more fancy, but you don't have to do that. Next. All right, so if you're around town, I'm sure you guys have seen charging stations at grocery stores. That picture there is Weaver's Way Co-op Ambler. A lot of some workplaces now are starting to have charging. It's a great amenity, especially if you can't charge at home and you could charge at work. It could give you a way of having an electric car. And a lot of car dealerships have these EVSEs, partly just to help sell their electric cars. But if you can charge at home, you probably won't need them. All right, now what about if you're on the road? I know this is where people get challenged. So there's a thing called a destination charger, which is really the same as those chargers at a grocery store or something, but they're designed for people. They go to a hotel, you need to fill your car up again, and you have all night. So the 25 miles per charge hour is fine. But if you're on the highway and you really need to get somewhere, you need faster charging. You would not wait, hours and hours for your 25 miles per hour. That would be ridiculous. So this fast charging network is what the Build Back Better, no, the infrastructure bill that's already been passed has a lot of money for this. And this is really trying to get a whole network on the highways, and like Tesla, as you can see there, has actually done a tremendous amount of work themselves, but other cars can't use the Tesla charging network. So the picture on the right is a company called EVgo, and they have a lot of these fast chargers. There's another one called Electrify America, which has a whole network as well. And this is something that's coming. But I have to tell you that if you are going to buy one of these cars, they vary a tremendous amount. The fast charging is not standard on many of the cars, so you do have to be really careful if you plan to go on long trips with your car. Next slide. So how does it feel? Well, at first you're really nervous and you always feel like you're going to run out, and what are you going to do? And I did call AAA and I said, hey, what do you do if I run out of electricity? And they're like, oh, we tell you to the nearest charging station. So I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's not so bad. But I've never run out of electricity. You understand like what your car needs. It's best if you have a car with over 200-mile range, because I think if it's lower than that, you'll get nervous a lot. But around town, it's really not a problem because you're usually driving 20, 30, 40 miles, whatever. You come home, you can plug it into your 120 outlet. It's charged overnight. So it's just not an issue. If you're going on a trip that's, less than the range of your car, not a big deal. You just charge it when you get back home. If you go, over 100 miles, you're probably going to want a charger on the other end. If you're, and if you're going long distance, like I drove to Boston in the Chevy Bolt, it took me an extra 2 hours. So that wasn't so fun. And we got the Tesla afterwards, and it only took us maybe an extra 20 minutes. So there's really a huge difference in that. And that, I think right now the Tesla has the best charging network, but over time that will change. Next slide. I'm trying to go fast. So what do you decide? Well, first of all, everybody should get an electric car. Just gonna say that. But you got to think about how you use your car. How much do you drive? Can you charge at home? If you're renting, you can talk to your landlord. This is not true in Pennsylvania, but I know California law actually requires landlords to allow a renter to set themselves up for EVs if they don't provide it. So you might have to put your own charging station in, but they have to allow you to do that. So that's something, maybe some laws around here could be changed. If you can't charge at home, can you charge at work? Is there a charger nearby? Maybe you can, go to Whole Foods and have lunch there and charge your car. Does your family have 2 cars? Because one of them is probably a car that gets just used around town. You could easily find a way to charge that, and maybe the other one is for your longer trips. And if you don't have money for a new car, well, there's more and more used cars. Now, not right now, of course, because there's no used cars for anyone. But as more and more people buy the electric cars, the used car market will get bigger. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here's a couple resources. Drive Electric Week is an organization which plans at least once a year. They have these big events that people bring their electric cars. You can talk to people that own them and get a good sense of real people's experiences. The Drive Electric PA Coalition just has a lot of information about what Pennsylvania is doing. PlugShare is a great app. You can download it, or you can go to the website, and that will tell you where all the charging stations are. And there's a lot of user feedback. People will say when they got there, how well it worked, that kind of thing. And plugstar.com is a site I just found that has a description of car and had this pretty cool graph that you see there where it's showing sort of the cost of the car versus the range. And those one way up in the corner, expensive, and to the right are the super long range Teslas. But you can see there's a bunch of other cars, and this is an area, you know, all kinds of cars are being made. Next. Oh, time of use pricing. Should we move on to that, Liz?
Yeah, just if you could, just very briefly touch on it.
Okay, I mean, I do have a couple of slides, but I think I'll just do this. So time of use pricing is a new program that Pico is offering, which allows you to pay a different amount depending what time of day it is. Right now, if you have Pico as your electric supplier, you're paying 7 cents a kilowatt hour. But the new program allows you to pay between 2 and 6 p.m. on non-holiday weekdays. They've decided that that's when electricity is the most expensive. So their idea is if they can get you to not use electricity at that time, that would be ideal. So what they've done is they've created a rate that is basically 3 times the normal rate, but only between those hours, 2 to 6, non-holiday weekdays. And what they're trying to do is encourage you to use either super off peak, which is 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., or off peak, which is any other time. So one of their ideas is that as people buy more and more EVs, they're going to want to encourage people to charge in the middle of the night, which is a great time to charge. So, but what people will tend to do is they'll come home from work and they'll plug in and they'll use the electricity maybe at between 5 and 6, which they don't want you to do. They want you to charge between 12 and 6. So this is a rate schedule that could motivate people to do that. And I do have a couple more slides, but we can just skip them because I know it's late, unless you want me to talk about this.
Well, I know you've done an analysis of your own home. So if you could use that, yeah, just talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, so I looked at my house. I said, well, what would time of use mean? And I have solar. So that little chart there is from my solar system. And it's basically saying I have production monitoring and I also have consumption monitoring. So the red stuff, that red color is energy that I'm using from Pico. The blue color is energy that I'm using from my solar system. And the green is energy that I'm actually sending back to the grid. Yeah, thanks for the arrow. So, and that little black area that says peak, that is the peak time. So on this particular day, it was a very sunny day, and I'm thinking this is August, so we turn the air conditioner in the middle of the day. And so we were using this peak energy, which normally would be costing 20 cents during time of use. So that's a lot, but I had the solar. So the little chart on the left, you see where it says with solar. Can you point to that, the yellow part? So I said, well, what does this mean? And it turns out that because we were actually giving them more energy during peak than we were using, the net effect was that the time of use would actually be better than the non-time of use with solar. But if we hadn't had solar, our time of use charge would have been, you can see that $4.03, and the non-time of use would have been $2.80. So it really just depends on your usage. So you have to be careful. And if you look at the next slide real quick, I'll try to go through this real quick. I looked at all my data from 2015 because, you know, like Liz said, I'm sort of a data geek. I do have all my data. and I assigned it to the time of day and and I figured out that before we had solar, time of use and not time of use were pretty close. We would have saved $7.42 the first year, 69 cents if we had time of use the second year. You know, clearly these numbers are so small, they don't really matter. But as soon as we got solar, all of a sudden we would be saving, you know, closer to $200. So that's significant. But then I thought, well, wait a minute, this is all about EV charging. So what does that mean? Well, say you drive 100,000 miles a year, or that's how much you charge at home. that would be about 2,500 kilowatt hours. You're gonna have to trust me on that one. But if you did it with a regular non-time rate, it would cost $176. If you did all your charging super off peak, it would cost you $79. So you would save $97. But you had to be careful, because if you mess up and you start charging during peak, it's going to cost you $519. So it's tricky. You have to, if you were to go with time of use, you're going to have to pay attention to when you use electricity. And if you don't have an electric car, the electricity you're using, some of it you can control, like you can run your dishwasher at night, right? You could schedule it to be in the middle of the night. But your air conditioning, that's a little more tricky, because when you're hot, you probably want to get cold. And if it's peak time, you're probably going to turn on your air conditioning. So you have to look at your own usage and figure out what makes sense for you. And this is just time, Pico has a tool that you can actually look at your own usage historically. And this is my house. And because I have solar, my electricity bill is super low. So with my current rates, it cost me $265 a year. But if I had time of use, it would cost me $85 a year, which is about what I calculated. So that's pretty cool. Pico's tool and my tool work the same. But basically, if you want to know more about this, Pico has a pretty good time of use FAQ. And if you just Google for Pico TOU FAQ, you'll find it. And that's that.
So are you going to switch?
I don't know, because I still feel bad, because then I would be using more energy in the middle of the night, and it's dirty energy. I don't know. I'm conflicted. But yes, from money, yes, I should switch, but I don't know.
Oh, that is wonderful.
Yeah, anyway.
All right, so we do have some time for questions, and I will just turn this open onto the floor, and please just raise your hand.
Liz,
Use your little hand. Yes, Ruth.
I've been tracking questions in the chat. Maybe
great.
maybe we could start with some of those.
Okay.
Some at the very beginning, there was a question about whether connecting to the grid is an issue in our area, if for people who want to put solar panels on. Can anybody answer that question?
I can answer.
Go ahead.
So yeah, so there are in I mean, there's a few places in Center City, Philadelphia, where you're not even allowed to send energy back to the grid because it's super old and Pico really needs to upgrade it. Most of the rest of the area is fairly good. There's a map that's that Pico has. I think it's called the interconnection map, where you can actually put your address in, and there'll either be a green dot or a yellow dot. And the green dot means you're good, and the yellow triangle means you're probably good, but we might have an issue and you might not be able to get as big a system as you want. But for most like our house, actually, we had a challenge. We had a little yellow triangle, and we had to, first they wanted us to reduce the system size, but instead of that, they had a way of changing our inverter so that if we ever hit a high voltage, which is what they're concerned about,
right,
it would shut off the inverter.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank
there
you.
are ways around it. Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge a comment that came through in the chat, which is that we really need more information for areas outside of southeastern Pennsylvania and maybe New Jersey. So what Marion said applies to people in the Philadelphia
Yes.
region, but for other people in the PYM area, if there are people on this call who have information about that and you share it with us, maybe we can get it out to people as part of our follow-up. Another solar question was, would it be better to electrify your home first and then apply for solar? Liz, do you want to answer that?
The very best thing you can do is do energy efficiency first. So reduce your load. Remember the donkey and reduce your load, because the solar system on a conventional roof for a conventional home will cover your entire load if your load is average or below. But if your load is extremely high, your solar system is going to be undersized. So the very best thing you can do is energy efficiency first.
Thank you. One last solar question. This is about leasing. How do we know who's a good company and who's a bad company?
Yeah, I am not an expert on leasing, but I have heard a number of horror stories. And I do know in the very early days of leasing that leasing was oversold and companies promised things they did not deliver. So that's why I only included one company on the slide. The company that I included is called Posigen. They are based in Louisiana. They are very unusual. And as I mentioned, they guarantee savings. They will not take your job if they cannot guarantee savings. And the reason I'm very confident about them is they have been fully vetted by the Philadelphia Energy Authority, and they are now part of the Solarize Philly program. This is the first time Solarize Philly has included a leasing option. Leasing is great for many people who might decide to move in a couple of years, who might not have the capital to put down on a system. And Posigen includes both energy. The reason they can guarantee you savings is they do the energy efficiency and they take the savings from the energy efficiency to help cover the cost of solar. So if you know these resources, you know that energy efficiency is the most cost-effective form of energy. So you get more savings out of energy efficiency than any other form of energy. So energy efficiency, if you combine it with solar, it helps to pay for the cost of solar.
Great, thank you. There are about 3 heat pump questions. The first is pretty general. Is our area too cold for heat pumps? I think Paul addressed that a little bit, but maybe we can get a little bit more of an answer. But let me just say the other 2, and maybe Paul, you can work on all of them at once. Are there heat pump options for homes with radiators? And I've been told I have a system that includes a backup gas furnace, and I've been told that below 25%, I should switch to the gas furnace. Is that true?
Okay, you certainly can use a heat pump in this climate, and I mentioned climates that are colder climates they're now successfully working in. The second question was related to like a hot water system they have or steam. They mentioned radiators. That's a
Well,
separate.
That was Bill Cousins. Bill, do you want to ask your own question?
We have a hydronic hot water system with a boiler we replaced about 10 years ago now. It's a condensing boiler, Buderus. So it's a pretty high efficiency gas boiler. But eventually I would like to go to heat pumps, but I don't envision wanting to have to put in ducts to replace radiators. So I'm curious whether there's any way to pipe the hot water from the heat pump through my radiators.
I'm not familiar with that as a standard installation. I suppose if you have a heat pump water heater, you could put hot water. It may take several of those. What people typically do is they're stuck with the radiators and they decide whether they're going to physically remove them. And then they put the mini splits, those small wall hung units, which are independent. So you don't need to put ductwork and tear your house up with ductwork.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the same situation, Bill. Same, almost exactly the same. With the other question, who I wasn't clear on about 25% or something.
No, 20, actually, Paul, that was me. I have through the energy efficiency program in New Jersey, I was required to put in an efficient gas furnace as backup for my heat pump. And I've read that below 25 degrees, I should have my system set up so that it switches to gas heat below 25 degrees. Is that right?
It isn't right now, as far as I mean, like I mentioned, we have those apartments. They're beautiful townhomes on Cape Cod in Massachusetts that use heat pumps only. And they're good to minus temperatures, below 0 Fahrenheit. And we haven't had any complaints. So I'm not sure when they set up those parameters. It sounds like when heat pumps weren't as efficient and they hadn't gotten the technology where it is now. That's the only thing I'm guessing there.
Great, thanks. One or two other questions here. This one, how do we dispose of a gas mower if we do get an electric lawnmower?
I think you can take it to your Salvation Army.
Okay.
Put it out
And
on the, put it out on the corner and someone will pick it up.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
Maybe
when we
sign on
got,
it, it says free.
when
Oh,
I'm
and
gonna jump in here, when we
oh.
got our first electric mower, which was almost 20 years ago, a battery I'm talking about. It was a trade-in program and I got a rebate. There was a promotion through. So the thing is, if you put it out on the corner and give it to Salvation Army, you're just sending it back out to be used, an old, inefficient, fuming thing.
true. There was a question about whether New York State has an energy efficiency program. I don't know if there's anybody here who,
Yes, I know. New York has phenomenal energy efficiency programs and solar programs. So yes, just go on NYSERDA, NYSERDA, and you'll just, wander around forever. They have fabulous programs.
that's it for the chat. So if people want to raise their hands, you can either do it right on the screen or you can use the reactions function on your Zoom.
I know we zoomed through a lot of information and I apologize, but I wanted to give an overview of all of the different end uses at home that we can consider.
Liz,
Barbara Benton.
will the slides be available to people who are in attendance?
Yes, we'll send slides, and Ruth and I are still putting together what we call a resource, like a resource sheet, and we're going to ask all of our presenters to help us flesh that out a bit more. So 3 things we can provide after the webinar: the slides, the resource sheet, and answers to any questions that we don't get to tonight. I see Barbara Benton's hand up.
Yeah, it's Tom Jenick, actually. The question that I have is, you had mentioned about the entire home program. What did that, could you explain more what that means?
Sure. Home Performance with Energy Star is an EPA program, and it starts with a whole house energy audit. So it looks at all of the end uses in your home, regardless of the source of the fuel. So it looks at heating, water heating, lighting, electric appliances, everything in your home. And both New Jersey and Delaware, they're requiring the home performance approach. In Pennsylvania, we have what I would call more of a cream skimming approach, where the utilities go for the most cost-effective measures only. So for example, with Pico, you have to be using electricity to get a measure which saves electricity. So if your home is gas heated, Pico is going to help you only with lighting and a few other things. So in other words, Pico is only required to focus on electricity, and it's not a whole house approach.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Ed Dreby?
2 things. First of all, some time ago, I read in the New York Times an article about leaf blowers as being the most inefficient and carbon emitting enterprises on the planet.
Uh-oh, you come to the right place. I'm going to turn this over to Paul Ricker, who's an
Well,
expert.
but let me just speak about my solution, which is to buy a rake.
Yes, Eric.
And it would be
Rakes are
better
good.
for your body
Yes, indeed.
and a lot better for the atmosphere.
Yeah, Paul, you want to say something about leaf blowers?
Well,
Well,
Or
I
just
have a
leave the leaves
system
where
like
they are.
Marion has, that it's all electric rechargeable. The Cobalt system, I believe I saw the same equipment that Marion had in her photo. It's quieter, there's no exhaust, and it was handy, especially I've raked leaves for my whole life, so about 70 years. Well, I guess my parents gave me the first 3 years off, but close to 70 years. And but I did tear a rotator cuff, and the leaf blower kind of came in handy then. But I hear you; they're very polluting, the gas-fired ones.
Well, and I've never torn a rotator cuff, so I still use a rake.
the rake.
And
Yeah,
it
but
works well.
you also can just simply mow the leaves and let them
Mhm.
compost, you know.
Well, we
Okay.
do that too with an electric mower.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is that we live in Delaware County. And if you go on the line to Pico and ask what their best renewable electricity options are, the energy co-op is not there at all.
Mm.
And I've talked with the energy co-op about the reasons, and there are very good reasons. And it's worthwhile for people who care to find them out. And when we work with our meeting, Providence meeting, to kind of explain the options, we will find them out with greater clarity than I can express right now. But it's really worthwhile learning about those issues.
Great. Bruce?
Bruce, you're muted.
I'll just say another solution is I don't rake the leaves off my lawn anymore. I run the mower over them, and it helps to nourish the soil. I do it once or at the most twice at the end of the season. I also only mow my lawn about every 3 or 4 weeks. So you have to like long grass, but I don't see any need to mow it any more than that.
Paul, do you have a question?
Well, I have a comment. I would like to recommend a nonprofit membership-owned organization called checkbook.org. It is a regional organization that represents the Delaware Valley. There's also one in the Washington, D.C. area. There's one in the Minneapolis area, but it covers 5 counties in Pennsylvania, 3 counties in New Jersey, and Newcastle County in Delaware. So it is regional, and there's evaluations, speaking of the heat pump end, of 128 contractors, and they're rated on quality and on price. So you may be able to locate local contractors. It's a starting place that's been vetted. It's like people like us that submit reviews, and then they have secret shoppers that go out. They get pricing on items, and they also have a very special section on HVAC that would give you more information, where you would learn about some of the different options that we quickly went over tonight. Checkbook.org, $28 a year, $34 for 2 years, $56 for 4 years.
I've used it. It really is wonderful. Rita? You're still
Can't hear you,
muted.
Rita. You're still muted. There
Okay,
you go.
I've been reading about people saying we should not even rake the leaves, and pulverizing them is bad because there are insects in that have attached themselves to the leaves, and it kills the insects, and we're having trouble with making our insects extinct. So that supports Ed Dreby's proposal of just gently raking them into a spot that feels more aesthetic, but be gentle with the leaves.
Liz,
Yes.
it's Ruth. Paul's last comment made me think that there might be other people on the call who have some other resources that they'd like to share that they haven't put in the chat. If you share them with Liz or me in the next day or two, then we could incorporate those into the follow-up materials that we send out.
The other thing that we'd love to follow up with everybody on is when, I'm crossing my fingers here, when the Build Back Better bill passes, there will be a raft of tax credits available, and many of those will be directly related to what we talked about tonight. So we'd like to, send that to you in a form that's somewhat concise once it's known. So we're a little past time. Are there any final questions anyone has? All right.
Looks like Carolyn has a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you use, we have radiators right now and a pretty efficient gas furnace. Could we do like a combination, like maybe a mini split for one room and continue using the radiators for other rooms? Or would we have to do the whole house?
Paul, can you do that one again?
You can certainly do what you described. That's called zoning. And that actually could end up being very effective, and it would minimize your capital costs. The big thing with a lot of the heat pump changeover is a major capital cost, a big investment, and you have to time that with all the financing choices you're going to be making. So that could certainly be a great option.
Well, my head is spinning. I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot in putting this together, and I really want to thank all of our presenters tonight. Paul is just an amazing untapped resource of a font of knowledge. Marion just knows so much about EVs, and Ethan, I can't thank you enough for joining us all the way from Costa Rica. I envy where you are. And I want to thank everybody. Ruth, you're, just really wonderful working with all of you. And thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And happy holidays. And go electrify. All right, then.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, take
Very
care.
informative.
Good night.
Thank you, Liz, and everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, and thanks to Pat for providing the platform and the tech background.